This is what a normal Minecraft world looks like. Millions of blocks. This world only has one. In this video, I will survive 100 days on it, so enjoy the show. Friends of the sun, this is where the adventure started. Just me and a block of grass. But not just any grass block, but the one block, which surprised me right at the start with some blocks and even a box of apples and seeds. I immediately started crafting my first tools with the wood. And then it happened. My first friend spawned. It was a bit tight for the two of us, so I expanded the island with all the blocks I had. A short time later, I got my first seedlings, which I could now use to plant trees. A few blocks later, I was lucky enough to get a bucket of water that I could use to place a block under the bog block. From now on, blocks like sand or gravel would no longer fall into the void. I was treated to another box, but it had a strange villager sound to it. I didn't know exactly what that meant, but when I dismantled the box, a timer came on that announced the first phase. So I was now finished with the tutorial. I eagerly awaited the countdown, and the stage that awaited me was plains. At the beginning, there were a lot of blocks of grass, but I quickly got my first melon. With the wood I had collected so far, I built a small enclosure for my only friend so far. He felt a bit alone, but luckily, another little pig showed up, and I brought them together straight away. The next new item I got was a pumpkin, and immediately after that my first cow, who seemed to be really happy to be here. I was also surprised with a sheep, a chicken, and far too many animals in general. The space became a little too tight, and I expanded the enclosure a little. Late at night, the odd box with villager noise returned, and by taking it apart, I progressed to the next stage. I waited anxiously to see which one it would be next. When the stone appeared, it was clear. I was in the underground phase. Of course, I immediately crafted a pickaxe and got to work to see what awaited me in this phase. Time went by, and I encountered a mushroom cow. This was greatly beneficial, since mushroom stew could be had infinitely, easing my concerns about sustenance. Later, I acquired another, and things were smooth until a zombie appeared out of nowhere, but I quickly dispatched it with my wooden weapons. From now on, I had to expect new dangers. Who knows what other dangerous surprises this one lock had in store for me. That's why I made my initial sword, and due to limited space, I stashed the first items. Suddenly, 3 rabbits appeared, 2 trapped in the pen, and as I removed blocks, a creeper emerged, requiring caution. Thankfully, my skilled swordplay was enough, and he spared my island from destruction. I smelted iron and got swarmed by rabbits. Then I made a shield for better defense and planted my first trees to expand the island. I kept breaking the one block, and soon a box arrived with a villager sound and a card that I used right away. I was thrilled, curious about the map's appearance after 100 days. If I lasted that long, I dismantled the box and waited anxiously for the countdown again. This phase was apparently a kind of snow or winter phase. But before I tackled that, I wanted to give the one block some respect and generally build a more descriptive starting island. So I did that with the few blocks I currently had available. As you can see, I also built a bridge to a new small island for which I didn't yet have enough soil. I upgraded to my initial iron armor, not full set yet, but enough to progress. A wolf soon arrived, hostile to the sheep at first, but later mellowed. Sadly, I had no bones to tame it. Later, ice walkers appeared, potential bone sources, yet none dropped any for me. When 2 more ice walkers spawned later, I had my closest fight to date. But after a mushroom soup, I felt much better again. Still, I definitely needed more armor, so I continued mining diligently. Meanwhile, the buddy here surprised me. A decent polar bear, I would say. After I had a close fight against ice wanderers, in which the wolf even helped me, I immediately crafted a new piece of armor, a helmet. On the 4th day, something dangerous awaited me, namely a whole horde of opponents. So this was revenge for the ice walkers I took out earlier, and I really had to be careful. But I managed to split up the opponents a bit and take them out one by one, and the last shooter even gave up himself. What I experienced next was anything but nice. The fat polar bear apparently had something against the snow fox, and unfortunately, he couldn't escape from him. The stronger one wins, and I hope that I was the stronger one between me and the one block. This would become apparent often enough in the near future. With enough bones, I tamed my first 2 dogs, which were supposed to help me protect this island. And immediately afterwards, I unlocked the next phase. Now it was a sea phase, and I was excited for the fresh blocks and items. Earlier, I completed the second island and encircled it with a stone barrier. Afterward, I enticed all the creatures in, appreciating the extra room they had and the quiet from their noises. But I had no time to waste, and so I started dismantling the OneBlock, which gave me 2 turtles a short time later. I temporarily locked them in the cage, and immediately afterwards I got my first diamond. Since there were some fish spawning during the phase, I built a small temporary watering hole for them so that when they spawned, I could push them straight into the water. Every now and then, there would be enemies like these 2 guardians here, but I didn't have to do much against them anyway. I also really had fun watching these 2 pufferfish inflate throughout. I didn't have as much fun fighting the next wave of opponents. The pair of submerged men wielding tridents truly vexed me. Luckily, it wasn't too difficult, and I soon got a record and a book. I was immediately motivated to write something in the book, and just putting it in the box wouldn't have done justice to the masterpiece, so it found its place in the animal enclosure. Shortly before the end of the phase, I got a trident, and I was already looking forward to the next phase. But before I did this, I built a new small island. I also wanted to put the fish there, and so I transported them over with some difficulty. I couldn't just leave them in the small wooden tank, so I built a nicer little tank specifically for the fish, of which I had a few different ones. But the island had cost a lot of wood, so I dismantled the huge spruce tree. Now it was time to start the new phase, and I suspected that it was some kind of jungle cave phase. For example, a few parrots spawned, one of which I was allowed to tame straight away. I really had fun with it for a short time, but I had no time to waste. I wanted to achieve as much as I could in the 100 days. A huge panda then spawned, which I immediately brought into the animal enclosure, and a short time later, 2 witches came to visit and managed to, using poison potions, to get me to half a heart for the first time. I got my first horses, and a new wave of opponents got ready. There were even changes that made me not only kill my own parrot, but also really sweat it out. These little things are really difficult to fight and do an incredible amount of damage. So I behaved really passively, and these poisonous drinks from witches really lasted so long that I permanently cowered with half a heart with my animals. In the end, I managed to defeat the last opponent, and I learned one thing from this fight. I needed a ranged weapon, so I crafted a bow, which briefly made me feel very powerful. When I reached the end of the jungle phase, I received this generous gift here. But more importantly, I was in the next phase, those of the Red Desert. Over time, I had now collected some blocks and items, so I wanted to tidy things up a bit. I built my still very small but nice box storage on the new island, and I really have to say that my base now looks a little more organized and better. Now it was time to take down some blocks again, and right at the beginning, I was blessed with llamas. Later, also with the first human roommate on the island, Kai. To make sure nothing happened to it, I installed it as a precaution, and it was time to build something again. As you can see, I simply copied one island, but I didn't want to leave it so empty, so I built a small hut for my new buddy Kai. I took care of the interior for a bit, but then I was finished and just had to move it inside. Small but very cozy hut, I would say. We proceeded with disassembly. Not too thrilling, but 2 pillagers appeared unarmed. It was hilarious, so I caged one quickly. Then I constructed some defenses around the block for style and better protection against foes, preventing them from chasing me simultaneously. This was practical, as donkeys naturally remained central where they appeared, without fleeing. Over time, 2 more wandering traders spawned, which I immediately put in Kai's hut so that he no longer had to be alone. I also got Walter, Olivia, and Owen, which made the cabin a bit cramped, but oh well. I then received a small reward for working diligently, and the next phase was just around the corner. The Nether Hare. I was excited for this stage, glad to level up. I organized my storage and wanted to construct more, to enlarge my base. I recreated the starting island for extra room, promptly planting trees there. In order to build bigger things, I needed a lot more wood. When the first piglins appeared while dismantling, I simply locked them up, so I had a little more company, and a short time later, this appeared. The first netherite. I was really happy. For this, I had to craft a diamond pickaxe, and the first ancient debris found its place in my inventory. The diamond pickaxe was useful for mining obsidian too. While disassembling, suddenly 2 ghasts appeared, scaring me. I quickly took them down before they caused further damage. It was crucial to watch out for ghasts as they could break blocks below. Occasionally, hoglins appeared, yet the toughest part was the enemy wave. I got back to safety with my animals, but the big problem was the blazes. They managed to set my bridge on fire, and I was far too slow to put out the fire. The bridge was pretty much gone, and I had to build my way over to fight the blazes. And while I was there, they did so much damage to me, and I was at half a heart. Luckily, I managed to eat the soup in time, because look how close it was. Holy shit, I was lucky, but now this island was on fire too. I took down the blazes using a bow, but couldn't extinguish the fire, and my dogs caught flame. I really did my best, but there wasn't much that could be saved. Just look at how devastated my base looked now. Yes, that was pretty frustrating, but the time lapse as I recreated it is satisfying. I also built a cage around the OneBlock so that I could feel a little safer. Looking back, it was clear I shouldn't have used wood after the fire. Seems I learned nothing. Well, the main thing is that it looks okay. I spent the entire 21-night and 22-day dismantling the wall block, and at the end I got a lava bucket, which meant I could finally build a cobblestone generator. But before I did that, I waited for the next phase, where I didn't immediately know which one it was. I then gathered enough blocks, farmed some wood at my wood farm, and started building a path to my cobblestone generator to construct. Of course, I built it too, and it worked perfectly. I then stood there for a few minutes to test AFK and got over 2 stacks of stone. During the Nether phase, I was able to mine some obsidian blocks, of which I now had enough for a portal. But I didn't want to just put it somewhere random. I also wanted to build a nice space for it, so I started with that. Certainly, there was a shortage of materials, which caused a postponement in the construction of Nether Island. With a strong desire to explore the Nether, I proceeded to assemble the portal. Upon stepping through, I was met with no change, resulting in confusion. It appeared that, for some time, the pathway to the Nether had been obstructed, but more on that later. But I was a little disappointed. Well, I made myself a magic table and enchanted my first item, the iron breastplate, and then the sword too. The next thing I did was build a small field for everything. I planted wheat, carrots, potatoes, bamboo, squash, cactus, and sugarcane on it, basically everything I had. I then went back to the wall block where there was a lot of quartz, lots of austerity axe, and honey blocks. What I didn't find so nice was all the bees that kept poisoning me. When a cat spawned, I really wanted to tame it. The only problem was that I had almost no fish, so I fished in my 3-3 large pool. I was then able to tame her with the fish I caught and brought her to safety on my bed. Every now and then, I brought 1 or 2 animals to the animal island, including a skeleton horse and a zombie horse, which I was really happy about. I tamed another cat, and then came the wave of enemies in the phase, which really wasn't difficult compared to the others. Then I was finally done with the idyllic phase, and the countdown for the next one began. Meanwhile, I briefly went to my villager, where I was horrified to see that all but 1 invisible wandering trader was gone. I wasn't aware before, but now it seems likely it was the Vexes spawning occasionally and attacking villagers. Anyway, the next phase was upon us, and the block could only tell me one thing. I had reached the Stronghold phase. Nevertheless, I was eager to build something again, so I got some wood and the building could begin. As you can see, it's obviously a monster farm, where zombies, skeletons, spiders, and of course creepers spawn. This means I can now always farm enough bones, gunpowder, arrows, and 1 or 2 pieces of armor or tools. I immediately used the bones to get some wheat so I could multiply my cows, and I temporarily grew some sugar on my denominator island. The next bigger goal was a full enchanter, and for that, I needed a lot of paper and leather. Then it went back to the wall block, which once completely frightened me with a creeper, and a short time later with 4 skeleton riders. As if that wasn't enough, a charged creeper even spawned, which I was able to easily take out with a bow and arrow. The next tough opponent was an evoker, whose switches simply did excessive damage, but received in contrast, I also got my first totem, with which I was a bit safer. It wasn't all that exciting. Poison spiders or other critters just spawn frequently. In terms of items, I got some resources and even diamonds every now and then. At some point on the night of 35 day, I was finally done with the phase, and now there could only be one more phase ahead of me. The end. But I had broken down so many blocks in the last few days, so I wanted to add some variety. So I sorted out my camp a bit, expanded the sugarcane farm, harvested my field, increased the number of cows again, and felled all the trees. Then I added another small area that would only be used temporarily for the cow farm. I then fetched 2 of my cows, and I almost died again. Once again, I was only on half a heart. I also brought a mushroom cow closer to the middle so that I didn't always have to run to them. I then built a small device under OneBlock that made it easier for me to fight opponents. From now on, I could easily shoot them with a bow and arrow from the other island. On the evening of the 37th day, I started the final phase, which gave me an end eye and the dragon's breath right at the beginning, which meant that I wasn't far from the end. I also soon got another obsidian block with which I could try the Nether portal again. And yes, it still didn't work. After a bit of research, I realized that this should actually work, no matter what phase you are in. So it could only be a bug. And friends, finding out what the bug was took me several hours and then some time to fix it. I was really desperate and just tried everything until I finally managed it. For the curious, in my world setup, I had just the overworld, not the Nether or the end. I began a fresh world, went to the Nether, and moved it to my OneBlock elt, effectively unlocking the Nether there. So I was finally able to enter the Nether on 38th day with complete relief. You can't imagine how happy I was. That's why I immediately wanted to explore the Nether a bit. There was even a bastion right near the portal, which I of course entered immediately. At the top, I first reduced the piglins' gold supply, and apart from one chest that didn't have anything really good in it, I couldn't loot anything. My next goal was to find a Nether Estung, which I also found after a few minutes. I spent a little more time there than in the bastion. I fought a lot of blazes, wither skeletons, magma cubes, and looted some crates. My inventory became full very quickly, and I headed home again. But I think the yield is impressive. I then increased my cows, expanded the sugarcane farm, and suddenly I heard a Schalke on my island, which I got rid of somewhat laboriously. But that gave me a Schalke bell. On 40th day, I decided to take down more poppy blocks. It wasn't all that exciting until the wave. The wave itself was easy, but I still landed on half a heart once, and even had to use a totem right after that. Fortunately, I had one. Overnight, another Shulker Ox appeared, dropping a second Shulker Hell. I quickly made my first Shulker Ox to simplify tasks. Eventually, I decided to build again. I started by dismantling my mini pool and gathering more leaves, ready to start on the new box warehouse. When I was finished, all I had to do was sort everything, which took a little over half an hour. Then I felled a few trees, harvested my field, and went back to the warning block. Over the course of the 46th day, this happened. I went blind, was completely frightened, and thought that I was in for a really difficult fight. But thank God that wasn't the case, because the end portal spawned. It was finally time. I unpacked the final box, finishing all stages. I pondered what was next, momentarily puzzled by the end times block's meaning. Yet, it dawned on me that moving forward, phases would occur simultaneously. Thus, the spawning of either a single diamond or 2 ghasts is entirely unpredictable. Since it was already the 46th day and I hadn't built anything with redstone yet, I had to change that now. So I collected all the items and built the first automatic farm. A very small but fine cane arm. But that wasn't enough for me, and I built the same farm again with bamboo. Really not big, but at least they automatically produce items for me. Whenever I had time in between, I increased the number of cows, because I needed the leather for the full enchanter needed. Since I often went to fell trees, I used up a lot of stone with stone lizards, which unfortunately I then ran out of. So I stood at Cobblestone Farm for about 25 minutes and got over 15 stacks of stone. I put some of it in the oven to get cleansestone, and then the idea came to me that I could just build an oven room. So right, I just built one. And I have to say that I find it quite comfortable. Back at the cows, I realized that I already had enough cows for the full enchanter, so I started slaughtering a few of them. Using leather and paper, I made myself enough books, which I then crafted into exactly 15 bookshelves, which meant I could now make a full enchanter. I refused to place it just anywhere. It had to be fitting for a full enchanter. Hence, I crafted a unique creation for it. What do you say to that? Feel free to write it in the comments. I definitely think it's really nice. Now that I had the full enchanter, I also needed good things to enchant with. So I first crafted a deer sword and deer shoes. The first thing I enchanted was a book on loyalty 3 and sharpness 4. Then the deer pickaxe on unbreaking 3 and efficiency 4. But since I couldn't get luck or silk ouch on it, I took the enchantment down again and tried 4 times my luck held. Thank God, yielding silk ouch. I wanted to enchant even more, so I went briefly into the Nether, where I sniped a Garst and farmed my way back up to level 30. With that, I got Feather Falling 3 on my book, and I repeated this process 3 more times. I sniped like a god again, and got an almost perfect Silk Touch pickaxe, a Fortune 3 pickaxe, and Feather Falling 4 shoes. I aimed to mine extra diamonds with my upgraded gear for the ultimate battle. I wished for villagers to appear, as playing OneBlock without them would be regrettable. So I spent the next time at OneBlock, which gave me some valuable resources, and at one point even a villager spawn eye, and you can't imagine how happy I was. From now on, I could easily trade with villager, which should take me to the next level. Unfortunately, 1 wasn't enough. I needed 2 to be able to propagate them. So I went back to OneBlock, where I spent 2 whole days. At last, Kendra appeared, and my relief was immense. With 2 villagers, it was truly time to begin. Before that, I built a fat lump with the ores that I had collected so far and mined them with the lucky pickaxe, and I simply completely forgot that I was playing in 1.16, and the lucky pickaxe had no use for iron and gold. In the end, over 20 diamonds and a lot of other things came around. With that, I crafted the rest of the diamond armor and a diamond axle, which I enchanted perfectly. I created a simple villager farm, where the young villagers drop from above, and I move them below. So I gave the villagers bread, and I quickly had the first villager AB that I could transport away. Since I didn't have a trading spot for the villagers yet, I wanted to tackle that next. So first, I almost finished building the island for it, which I built in an oval shape. I also briefly enchanted my helmet, farmed some wood, and finished the platform. Then, construction of the trading house could begin. On 69 day, I started very small, building the stations for the villagers, and then got the first one. The first trait I was happy with was an efficiency 5 book, which I bought 2 of. It was the next villager's turn, and for him it was an unbreaking 3 book, which I also picked up 1 of. I really wanted to put the books I had now on my tools. I lacked an anvil and had too little iron for it. That's why I spent the whole night and the whole 71 day working on the warning block until I finally had enough iron to craft the arm boss. I slapped Unbreaking 3 on the fortune bag, and now I had 2 really cool deer bags. All that was missing was efficiency and, of course, mending. I got levels at the mob flag and got a pretty good pair of pants and actually a really good chest plate. But somehow, I don't like thorns that much, so I left the chest plainly mundane for now. Next, I transported another villager to the trading house, who became a librarian, and was finally offered a mending book. Of course, I bought one of them straight away, but I didn't have any more emeralds for any more. That's why I built the trading stations on the other side and got 2 more villagers, one of whom became an arrow maker. With this, I was able to trade sticks for emeralds and get to all the books much faster. I lacked wood for the sticks, so I chopped trees nearly all night. I got another illager kid, meant to be an archer too. I enchanted my sword with sharpness 3 and armor with protection 4 at the enchantment table, which was quite effective. I harvested my sugarcane there, and after a while checked how much the automatic farms had brought me. And the fact that so much bamboo had been collected was actually quite practical. This meant I could also craft extra sticks. I then traded them in huge quantities from my new trusted villager, and immediately afterwards I took care of the next librarian, who soon offered me a Protection 4 book. So, I bought a lot of emeralds again, which I traded against the first book. The baby illager from before now became an arrow maker, and since I was level 30 again, I enchanted my bow, and holy shit, it's really brutally strong, and I killed the first phantoms with it. The next thing I was enchanted by after a short mob pour was a book on FF4, which wasn't bad either. Now my armor wasn't really that bad, but I wanted to make it perfect, or a little better for the Ender Dragon fight. First of all, I added protection 4 and mending to the helmet, so it was almost perfect. After a bit of trading, I got 2 more Unbreaking 3 books and put one on the chest plate and the other on the shoes. When I couldn't trade anymore, I prepared for the final fight by brewing potions. But I was missing nether warts, so I went to the nether fortress and stole a few there. Back home on 76th day, I brewed some potions, including healing, regeneration, gentle fall, and strength. Now I was finally well prepared enough for the Ender Dragon. I crafted the 4th Eye of Ender and went to sleep again before the big enemy. Now the 77th day had arrived when I would enter the end. I placed the Ender Eyes and the portal was open, so I went in with full anticipation and immediately made my way to the top. Here he was, the Ender Dragon. To get a better position, I went to one of the large obsidian towers, where I immediately destroyed the end crystal. But instead of destroying the rest, I quickly built a small structure and simply escaped from the Ender Dragon. Yes, indeed, I constructed an aircraft and just flew off from the last battle. For a while, I was just wandering around in the forest, which was really a bit strange. After flying for ages, I finally arrived. I was at the Outer End Islands, and I was here for a very specific reason, because I wanted to get an elytra before I defeated the Ender Dragon. So I looked for an end city, which I found after some time. Unfortunately, the final ship wasn't there, which meant there were no elytra there. Nevertheless, I looted the entire end city, some of which had really bad stuff in it, and also got some shulker shells. Then I had to keep looking, and luckily the next end city I found had an end ship with it. After a bit of looting, I reached the top and immediately entered the ship, where the elytra was already waiting for me. Of course, I took it straight away and played around with it for a moment. Remember, I swapped the elytra for golden horse armor. I also grabbed the Ender's throat head and quickly dealt with it. Then I was able to fly for the first time, and I was aware that an elytra is very advantageous, especially in OneBlock. I looted the rest of the city extensively, and then made my way back. At my previous arrival point, I then built my way up, where I set up the flying machine and flew back to the Ender Dragon. I reached the main island after a longer trip, ready to battle the Ender Dragon. So I started destroying one end crystal after another until there were none left. Then I went into close combat with more intensity, and suddenly, I was catapulted into the air by the Ender Dragon. But luckily, I had drunk the potion of gentle fall beforehand. After more close combat and a few arrow hits, the time had come, and I fired the final shot from the air. As a reward for this fight, I got so many levels that I ended up exactly at level 69, and of course, an end portal. I also wanted to take the end day with me, and it just fell through the portal. Back home, I collected it and placed it in the middle of my island, but then I accidentally touched it and it just flew down into the void, and yeah, sometimes I'm just stupid. Well, the yield was definitely enormous, and I was able to take a lot with me. I then immediately made rockets, and so I was able to fly in my OneBlock elt for the first time. And I have to say, the world looks a bit strange from above. The next thing I did was bring more villagers into the trading house and give them new professions. One became a librarian with a fortune -3 book, and the other became a fisherman. But for the books I needed emeralds, of which I hardly had any left, so I went back to wood farming for a short time. I then brought in a villager who was also supposed to become a librarian. So while I was hoping for a good book from him, I was constantly trading with the arrow maker and getting a few emeralds back. After a really long time, I was finally offered a looting 2 book, which I bought 2 of, turned it into looting 3, and put it on my sword. I bought a protection and a mending book, both of which I put on my pants, and they were perfect. While it was night and the arrow makers were no longer trading with me, I set up a small warehouse in the trading house where I could temporarily store things. I also labeled every space and took care of other little things. When I was able to trade again, I got enough emeralds and bought a mending and an Unbreaking 3 book. I named both after placing them on the elytra, so it flew a lot better. The next major goal I set for myself was also to defeat the Wither in the 100 days. So I made my way to the Nether and flew straight to the Nether nest, where I wanted to get some Wither heads. I fought one Wither skeleton after another, and somehow I wasn't having too much luck with the drops, but I was all the more happy when I got the first Wither victim. The next 2 Wither pots didn't take too long to arrive, and I was now able to summon the Wither. I chose to confront him finally, taking on Nether Island. So I first finished building the floor plan so that I had an idea of how big it should be. Then I had to go to the Nether to collect a few resources for it, including a lot of the crimson trees and a few of those warp tendrils, where I also got a new achievement. I took a few nether rack locks with me, and then building the nether island could begin. I was almost finished, but I was still missing a few blocks, and so I had to go back to the nether to get a few blocks. With that, I was able to finish building everything on the surface, and I built a small secret room in the island for the nether portal. What do you say to that? I think that's pretty cool, I have to say. While I was building the island, the villagers were doing a good job, and I had a few of them in the pickup station again. Then I had the idea that I could use it to build an iron farm, because iron was in short supply all along. So I collected all the necessary items, for which I even went to the final flight and got some endstone bricks. Then I chose the place for the iron farm, which should be right next to my mob farm. Then building the farm could begin. The most annoying thing, however, was transporting the villagers and especially the zombie up there. The rest wasn't actually that complicated. When I finished it on the 94 day, it worked straight away, and from now on I would get passive voice all the time, which should also make things easier. 2 villagers were waiting to be picked up again, and I turned these 2 into farmers. In order to be able to trade these really well, I of course needed a little larger acreage. So I harvested my field, traded myself 1 or 2 foods, and then I started building a new farm. I built this under the cobblestone farm and initially made 2 floors of it. The top one with carrots, potatoes, beetroot, and wheat. The bottom one with pumpkin and melons. It's not a huge farm, but it should definitely be enough for a bit of trading to start with. In order to get the yields quicker, I sped things up with some bone meal and was then able to upgrade the 2 farmer illagers a bit. The automatic cane arm was also pleasant, but I wanted something more. So I built a currently very small sugarcane plot under the 2 other farms because I was running out of sand and soil. The farmers continued to be upgraded, and when I had both of them at expert level, and none of them had the 2 good trades, namely the pumpkin and the melon wheel, at the same time, one of them definitely had to suffer at some point. I had to do one thing as I neared the end. I constructed a tiny glass stage at the center and led a sheep onto it. Regrettably, I used up all my glass, so I trained with the librarian. Afterward, securing emerald for a bit, I snagged an extra name tag and dubbed this fellow. Hence, I had my vibrant sheep aiming to shield me from any sworn block shocks. For the remainder of the day, I tidied up and clarified parts of the island. The last night of this 100 days, I went to sleep for a bit. The 100 tag had another big challenge for me, namely the wither. Before that, I got a little dopamine kick by mining ores. But then it went to the end because I couldn't fight the wither in the overworld. It would probably have destroyed everything. In the end, I weighed it down, and after it charged up, it flew around completely wild and only attacked the Enderman. I forgot, making the fight quite tight. It wasn't easy to hit him with a bow like that, but when he got to the next phase and only took more melee damage, it all became a little more exciting. At times, he hit me on low life, and I really wasn't sure if I could manage this fight. The wither then somehow flew to the edge, where it stood still for a moment, and that's how I was actually able to defeat it. I received a generous reward for this difficult fight. The Nether Star. Back home, of course, I immediately crafted the beacon and set up a small version of it on one of my islands. Now I always had the haste effect in the area, which should be a good help when building OneBlocks. Since it was already 100 day, I didn't really have any plans, so I checked how much the railway had earned me so far, and it actually wasn't all that little. Then I said goodbye to my animals, looked at everything I had created in the 100 days, and I think that is impressive. I was really proud of it, and at the end of the 100 day, I watched the sunset. That was it. I survived 100 days in Minecraft Hardcore OneBlock without dying.